Your daughter, she's alive, and that's not all." Kako the parrot's shrill cry tore through the silence of the luxurious mansion, echoing like a bolt of lightning in a clear sky. Arthur, the magnate who had buried all hope of ever seeing his little Sophia again, felt the ground give way beneath his feet. His eyes widened in shock and terror, fixed on the frantic bird, which flapped its wings and repeated disjointed words about secrets and a cruel woman. Arthur's heart pounded, an avalanche of conflicting emotions, dread, disbelief, and a spark of hope, as the darkest truth of his life began to unravel before him, threatening to destroy every pillar of his existence. And what he discovered next would change his life forever. Arthur staggered, his hands reaching for support on the cold wall of the immense room. Kako's words still vibrated in his ears, a dissonant melody threatening to dismantle the reality he had built upon the pain and supposed loss of his daughter. "Sophia, alive?" he murmured, his voice hoarse, almost inaudible, a thread of hope and terror. He slowly approached the parrot's cage, his heart beating erratically in his chest, a strong, painful throb. Kako, as if sensing the urgency and despair of the moment, stirred again, his green and blue feathers gleaming under the sunlight streaming through the tall windows. Bianca. Evil. Hiding place. Locked up. The parrot squawked, and this time the words were not just a distant echo, but a whisper laden with a disturbing imitation of Bianca's voice, followed by a sound that resembled a muffled cry. A child's lament. Arthur felt a chilling shiver run down his spine, a coldness that came from within. Bianca, his wife, the woman he had comforted in his own grief, to whom he entrusted his life and his heart. The idea was absurd, grotesque, an affront to his reason. But Kako's persistence, the way he articulated the sounds and phrases, was chillingly convincing, planting a seed of doubt and dread. He knelt before the cage, his tear-filled eyes fixed on the birds, desperately seeking more. "Kako, my friend, what are you trying to tell me? Where is Sophia? What has Bianca done, my God?" Arthur's voice was a mere thread, laden with a desperate plea, almost a moan. The parrot tilted its head, as if pondering the weight of its revelations, and then, with a clarity that cut through the air like a sharp blade, it repeated, "Bianca. Took her. In the basement. Hunger. Cold. Sophia cries." Every word was a stab to Arthur's lacerated heart. The basement. That place Bianca always insisted on keeping locked, with flimsy excuses about storing old, unused things. He had never suspected, never imagined such wickedness. The image of his sweet Sophia, so small, so fragile, suffering alone, locked up, hungry and cold, under the same roof as him, while he lived in his bubble of grief and false comforts, was unbearable, heart-wrenching. A cold, overwhelming rage began to bubble within him, mixed with excruciating guilt. How could he have been so blind, so deceived? Memories began to click into place like pieces of a macabre and painful puzzle. Bianca's haste to get over the loss, her insistence on removing all of Sophia's toys from the room, her flimsy excuses to prevent Arthur from entering certain areas of the house, small details, previously ignored and meaningless, now screamed the cruelest truth. Arthur's mind, accustomed to the cold logic of business, now worked with feverish urgency, connecting the dots of an unimaginable betrayal, of a perverse plan. He stood up, his legs trembling, but with a new and terrible determination that hardened his expression. There was no time for despair or pain, only for immediate and precise action. If Sophia was alive, if she was suffering at Bianca's hands, he would find her no matter the cost, and Bianca. The thought of the woman he loved, the architect of such heinous cruelty, made his stomach churn with nausea. The mask of grief and support she wore was now an image of pure perfidy, of calculating malice. Arthur needed to be cunning. He couldn't alert her to his discovery. He needed irrefutable proof. He needed to act with a surgeon's precision, to unravel every lie and rescue his beloved daughter. His eyes, once clouded by deep sorrow, now burned with a renewed fire, a fire of justice and unwavering paternal love. Sophia's fate depended on him, and he would not fail, ever. Arthur took a deep breath, the air thick and heavy in his lungs. The mansion, once a sanctuary of luxury and tranquility, now seemed a labyrinth of secrets and betrayals. He knew he needed to act with discretion. One false move, and Bianca could realize her castle of lies was crumbling. The image of Sophia, small and vulnerable in the dark basement, was a torment that spurred him on. His fists clenched, the vein in his forehead throbbing with contained rage. Guilt gnawed at him, an open wound in his soul. How could he have been so naive, so blind to Bianca's signs and excuses? His grief had clouded his judgment, making him an easy prey for manipulation. But now the fog was dissipating, revealing the monstrosity of the truth. He needed a plan that would allow him to investigate without raising suspicion, to observe Bianca, every movement, every word, to find a way to access the basement, his daughter's captivity. As Arthur tried to compose his facade of a grieving man, the living room door opened softly. Bianca entered, a melancholic smile, reddish eyes as if she had been crying. She approached, her hand extended to touch Arthur's arm, a gesture he would once have interpreted as comfort, but now seemed a cruel act. "My love, are you all right? You look so pale. Still thinking about our little Sophia?" Her soft voice, full of false compassion, sent a chill down Arthur's spine. He forced a smile. Bianca, in turn, watched Arthur with disguised attention. Inside, a cold calculation. Caco's words, unintelligible to her, had left Arthur agitated. She needed to maintain control, to ensure he remained in grief and dependence. "I was thinking of making some chamomile tea to calm your nerves. You've been pushing yourself too hard." She squeezed his hand affectionately, but her eyes quickly scanned the room, searching for any hint that her facade was at risk. Arthur felt her touch like a branding iron, but maintained his composure. "Yes, a tea would be good, Bianca. Thank you." He subtly moved away, feigning a need to sit down. His eyes, however, didn't miss a single movement of hers. As Bianca headed to the kitchen, Arthur seized the opportunity for a quick detour. His gaze swept the room, searching for the landline phone. He needed an excuse to leave, to set up his support network without her knowing. An urgent business meeting would be perfect. Caco, from his cage, watched the scene with intelligent eyes, shaking his head. "Bianca! Evil! Basement!" he squawked softly, almost a whisper, as if to reinforce the message only for Arthur. The parrot was his only ally, his link to the truth. Arthur felt a wave of gratitude for the little bird, his unlikely messenger. He promised himself that Caco would also be protected, an essential part of his new family. With each passing second, the urgency to act grew. Arthur knew he couldn't confront Bianca directly. She was cunning, and Sophia's safety was his top priority. He needed irrefutable proof, an infallible plan. That chamomile tea would be his cue to begin the investigation, unravel the web of lies, and rescue his daughter. His eyes, once tear-filled with pain, now shone with cold determination. Justice would be served, and Sophia would return to his arms. Arthur took a deep breath, the air thick and heavy in his lungs. The mansion, once a sanctuary of luxury and tranquility, now seemed a labyrinth of secrets and betrayals. He knew he needed to act with discretion. One false move, and Bianca could realize her castle of lies was crumbling. The image of Sophia, small and vulnerable in the dark basement, was a torment that spurred him on. His fists clenched, the vein in his forehead throbbing with contained rage. Guilt gnawed at him, an open wound in his soul. How could he have been so naive, so blind to Bianca's signs and excuses? His grief had clouded his judgment, making him an easy prey for manipulation. But now the fog was dissipating, revealing the monstrosity of the truth. He needed a plan that would allow him to investigate without raising suspicion, to observe Bianca, every movement, every word, to find a way to access the basement, his daughter's captivity. As Arthur tried to compose his facade of a grieving man, the living room door opened softly. Bianca entered, a melancholic smile, reddish eyes, as if she had been crying. She approached, her hand extended to touch Arthur's arm, a gesture he would once have interpreted as comfort, but now seemed a cruel act. "My love, are you all right? You look so pale. Still thinking about our little Sophia?" Her soft voice, full of false compassion, sent a chill down Arthur's spine. He forced a smile. Bianca, in turn, watched Arthur with disguised attention. Inside, a cold calculation. Caco's words, unintelligible to her, had left Arthur agitated. She needed to maintain control to ensure he remained in grief and dependence. "I was thinking of making some chamomile tea to calm your nerves. You've been pushing yourself too hard." She squeezed his hand affectionately, but her eyes quickly scanned the room, searching for any hint that her facade was at risk. Arthur felt her touch like a branding iron, but maintained his composure. "Yes, a tea would be good, Bianca. Thank you." He subtly moved away, feigning a need to sit down. His eyes, however, didn't miss a single movement of hers. As Bianca headed to the kitchen, Arthur seized the opportunity for a quick detour. His gaze swept the room, searching for the landline phone. He needed an excuse to leave, to set up his support network without her knowing. An urgent business meeting would be perfect. Caco, from his cage, watched the scene with intelligent eyes, shaking his head. "Bianca. Evil. Basement," he squawked softly, almost a whisper, as if to reinforce the message only for Arthur. The parrot was his only ally, his link to the truth. Arthur felt a wave of gratitude for the little bird, his unlikely messenger. He promised himself that Caco would also be protected, an essential part of his new family. With each passing second, the urgency to act grew. Arthur knew he couldn't confront Bianca directly. She was cunning, and Sophia's safety was his top priority. He needed irrefutable proof, an infallible plan. That chamomile tea would be his cue to begin the investigation, unravel the web of lies, and rescue his daughter. His eyes, once tear-filled with pain, now shone with cold determination. Justice would be served, and Sophia would return to his arms. While Bianca prepared the tea, Arthur dialed a number he hadn't used in a long time, that of his former private detective, a discreet and loyal man named Marcos. Arthur's voice was calm, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed the internal storm. "Marcos, I need your services. It's a delicate family matter. Urgent. Can we meet in an hour? At my office in the city? No one must know." The reply from the other end was a firm, unquestioning "Yes, Mr. Arthur." Arthur hung up, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. He wasn't alone. Bianca returned with the tray, the steaming tea, and a small biscuit. "Here you are, my love. I hope it helps." She offered it with a forced smile, her eyes still scrutinizing Arthur's face. He took the cup, feeling the warmth through the porcelain, and thought of the coldness of the woman before him. "Thank you, Bianca. I need to go to the office. A last-minute emergency. I shouldn't be long." He stood up, the rehearsed excuse sounding convincing. Bianca nodded, a slight frown on her face, but without questioning. Arthur knew she would try to find out about the emergency, but he was already one step ahead. As he passed the cage, Caco let out a long squawk, almost a warning. "Careful!" Bianca! Evil! Arthur cast a quick glance at the parrot, a silent nod of understanding. That small creature was the key to everything. He left the room, leaving Bianca behind, his mind buzzing with the plan. The path to truth would be tortuous, but his love for Sophia was his unwavering guide. He wouldn't rest until his daughter was safe in his arms, and justice finally prevailed. Arthur, with a heavy heart, drove his luxury car out of the estate, Sophia's image in his mind, small and frightened. The morning sun, which once seemed to promise a new day, now only illuminated the darkness of his soul. He felt like a fool, a father who had failed to protect his own daughter, blinded by grief and manipulation. Guilt was a heavy burden, but the determination to correct his mistake was even stronger. He needed to be cold and calculating like Bianca, at least for now, to unmask her and bring Sophia back. At the office, Marcos, a middle-aged man with shrewd eyes and a discreet demeanor, was already waiting for him. Arthur greeted him with a firm handshake, the formality necessary to disguise the desperate urgency that consumed him. Marcos, thank you for coming so quickly. I have an extremely delicate situation that requires your utmost discretion and skill. Arthur paused, searching for the right words to begin the revelation without sounding completely insane. It's about, my daughter, Sophia. Marcos's eyes widened slightly. He knew about the tragedy of little Sophia, a case that had shaken high society. Sophia, Mr. Arthur, but I thought... Arthur raised his hand, interrupting him. Exactly, Marcos. I have very strong reasons to believe that Sophia is alive, and that her supposed death was an orchestrated hoax. Arthur's voice was a whisper, laden with deep pain and contained rage. He couldn't mention Kako yet. It would be too much for Marcos to process. A hoax? Who would do such a thing, sir? Marcos asked, his voice low, but his gaze fixed and attentive. Arthur hesitated, his loyalty to Bianca, however shaken, still fighting against the cruel truth. But Sophia was his priority. Marcos, I need you to investigate Bianca. Every step she takes, every call, every movement. I want you to find out where she's been in recent months, who she's contacted, and above all, I want you to focus on any suspicious activity on our property, especially concerning the basement. Marcos nodded slowly, absorbing the gravity of the words. The implication was clear and shocking. Understood, sir, discreetly, without leaving a trace. Arthur felt a small relief. He trusted Marcos. Excellent. And Marcos, Sophia's safety is paramount. If you find any indication, any clue, no matter how small, I want to be informed immediately, no matter the time. Meanwhile, at the mansion, Bianca watched Arthur's car disappear down the long driveway. A thin, almost imperceptible smile appeared on her lips. She knew Arthur was agitated, but she attributed it to renewed grief. The chamomile tea, with an extra dose of a mild sedative, would ensure he remained calm and pliable. She turned to Kako, who watched her silently from his cage. "Foolish bird," she murmured with icy disdain. "Your chirps mean nothing." But for a brief instant, a pang of apprehension struck her. The parrot seemed to observe her with a disturbing intelligence. She shook her head, dismissing the thought. No one would suspect her. Her plan was perfect. At that moment, Arthur was already outlining the next steps with Marcos, his mind sharp and focused. With each detail they discussed, the hope of finding Sophia again grew, mixed with the terrible certainty that Bianca was capable of unimaginable cruelty. He needed to be strong for Sophia. The path would be long and painful, but the image of embracing his daughter one day spurred him to move forward. No matter the cost, Arthur and Marcos remained in the office, the atmosphere charged with silent tension. The millionaire, with his elbows resting on the mahogany desk, massaged his temples, his eyes closed for an instant. "Marcos, Every minute counts. We cannot fail. My daughter's life is at stake. His voice, though low, carried the force of a contained hurricane. Marcos, with his usual calm, nodded. I understand the urgency, Mr. Arthur. I will start with discreet surveillance of Bianca. I'll track her movements, her contacts. I'll also check the mansion's security records, if any, and any unusual delivery or renovation activity in recent months. The basement, now that's our priority. Arthur opened his eyes, a glimmer of gratitude and despair in them. Yes, the basement. Bianca has always been very protective of that space. She said she kept old things there, that there was no need for anyone to go down there. He swallowed hard, the image of Sophia, small and frightened, returning to his mind. Marcos, I need someone trustworthy to help me access the basement when the time is right. Someone who won't raise suspicions. Marcos pondered, a finger on his chin. I have a contact, a former security engineer, discreet and efficient. I can recruit him for a routine assessment at the mansion. That would give us access without raising alarms. Arthur nodded, a small spark of hope flickering. Meanwhile, at the mansion, Bianca enjoyed a late breakfast, a satisfied smile on her lips. Arthur had left apparently for an urgent meeting, and she felt a renewed sense of control. The mild sedative in the previous night's tea and in his breakfast had done its job, leaving him more apathetic, easier to manipulate. Poor Arthur, she thought with cold cynicism, so trapped in his grief, so blind to the truth. She looked at Caco's cage, who watched her with his curious eyes. You're just a noisy bird, aren't you, Caco? Your meaningless words can't touch me. She chuckled softly, a dry, joyless sound. However, a slight chill ran down her spine. There was something in the parrot's gaze, an intelligence that bothered her. She shook her head, dismissing the feeling. It was just an animal. No one would ever believe a bird. Her plan was infallible. Sophia was safe, well guarded, and Arthur would continue to be her puppet, securing her position and fortune. She stood up, determined to go to the basement, not to see Sophia, but to reinforce the lock, to feel the power of her cruelty. Back at the office, Arthur felt the weight of every word exchanged with Marcos. Bianca, she's cunning, Marcos, very. We need to be more so. We can't make mistakes. Sophia depends on us. He stood up, walking to the window, observing the city's movement. His mind wouldn't stop, replaying every detail, every memory of the past months. The guilt for his blindness was an overwhelming burden, but he would transform it into strength. Marcos, sensing Arthur's anguish, placed a hand on his shoulder. Mr. Arthur, we will find her. Have faith, and don't blame yourself. Manipulation is a powerful weapon. Arthur nodded, grateful for the understanding. He knew the journey would be long and painful, but the image of reuniting with Sophia, the embrace he had longed for so long, was the fuel that kept him going. He would return home, feign normalcy, but his eyes and ears would be alert, every nerve tense, awaiting the slightest sign. Justice for Sophia was on its way. Arthur drove back to the mansion, his heart heavy, but his mind sharper than ever. Every curve in the road, every tree they passed, seemed a reminder of lost time, of his daughter's silent suffering. Upon entering the property, he forced a weary expression, the mask of grief Bianca expected. The mansion, once a refuge, was now a minefield where every word, every glance could be fatal. He parked the car and entered, feeling the air heavy with secrets. Bianca awaited him in the living room with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a cup of tea in hand. Arthur, my love, you took a while. Was the meeting very exhausting? Her voice was mellifluous, but Arthur noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes probed him. He nodded with a forced sigh. Yes, an unexpected problem, but resolved for now. He avoided her gaze, pretending to be exhausted, and sat on the sofa observing Kako in his cage. The parrot, as if understanding the charade, remained silent, merely observing the scene with its peculiar intelligence. Bianca, satisfied with Arthur's apparent lethargy, felt temporary relief. Her plan seemed to be working. "I'll excuse myself for a moment, my dear. I need to check something in the basement. Those old boxes, you know, to see if they're in order." She stood up, adjusting the hem of her dress, an air of nonchalance that didn't fool Arthur. He knew she wasn't going to the basement for old boxes. His eyes followed Bianca as she walked away, the sound of her footsteps echoing down the corridor until they faded. Arthur waited tense, every fiber of his being on alert. Bianca descended the cold basement steps, the smell of mold and damp earth filling her nostrils. The small lamp hanging from the ceiling swayed, casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. She approached the hidden door where Sophia was. The satisfied smile on her lips faltered slightly as she heard a muffled whisper coming from within. "Sophia, you still haven't given up, have you?" she murmured to herself, a flicker of irritation in her eyes. She unlocked the door, pushing it open. The darkness inside was almost total, but her eyes adjusted. Sophia was huddled in a corner, knees hugged to her chest, her face pale. But what caught Bianca's attention was a small object the girl held tightly in her hands. It was a crude little doll, made of cloth scraps and some loose threads Sophia had found. Its eyes were 2 buttons, and its hair, a few pieces of wool. But what was truly unexpected, and what made Bianca's blood run cold, was the doll's resemblance to Arthur. There was a small piece of paper attached to the doll's chest, where Sophia had scribbled with charcoal, "Daddy." The little doll, a symbol of hope and unwavering love, was a turning point in Bianca's cruel mind. She had expected to find a broken, hopeless child, but there was proof of Sophia's resilience, of her unwavering faith in her father. A cold, uncontrollable rage seized Bianca. She bent down, snatching the doll from Sophia's hands with force. "What is this, you brat? Did you think your father would come save you? He doesn't even remember you." Sophia, startled, let out a small cry, her eyes wide with fear, but not total despair. Bianca crushed the doll in her hand, her eyes flashing. That small gesture from Sophia, that doll, was a direct challenge to her authority, to her ability to break the girl's spirit. It was proof that Sophia still had a connection to Arthur, a hope Bianca thought she had extinguished. The control she believed she had over the situation and over Arthur began to waver. The girl was not yielding. Bianca emerged from the basement, slamming the door shut with a bang, her face contorted by a silent fury. She locked the door again, with more force than necessary, the sound of metal echoing through the house. Upon returning to the living room, Arthur observed her. Her eyes, once calculating, now held a disturbed glint, a shadow of anger and frustration he had never seen before. She tried to regain her composure, but her lips were tight and her hands trembled slightly. "Everything's in order, my love. Just some old things that need to be discarded." Her voice was sharper than usual. Arthur nodded, maintaining his facade, but inside, a new piece clicked into place. Something had happened in the basement, something that had shaken the cold Bianca. He felt a chill. Justice for Sophia was closer than he imagined, and now the urgency was even greater. He needed to act. Arthur felt a chill run down his spine. The disturbed glint in Bianca's eyes, her sharp voice, her slightly trembling hands, everything indicated that something significant had happened in the basement. It wasn't the discarding of old things. It was proof that Sophia was there, and that her presence, her resilience, was shaking the facade of her cruel stepmother. He needed to act, and fast. Every second of hesitation could cost his daughter's life or spirit. With a seemingly genuine sigh, Arthur stood up. "I'm going to take a shower, my love. I feel exhausted." He walked slowly towards the bedroom, but his eyes didn't miss a single movement from Bianca. She had her back to him, looking out the window, her shoulders tense. In the hallway mirror, Arthur saw the reflection of his face, a mixture of pain and iron determination. He needed a moment alone, away from Bianca's ears and eyes. In the bathroom, as the shower water ran, muffling any sound, Arthur took out his cell phone. He dialed Marcos's number, his hand slightly trembling, but his mind clear. "Marcos, it's me. I need an update, and I have new information." His voice was low, almost a whisper, but the urgency was palpable. Bianca just came back from the basement. She was disturbed, not her usual calculating calm. Something down there shook her. "My daughter is there, Marcos. I feel it." On the other end of the line, Marcos replied with a grave voice, "Mr. Arthur, I've already contacted the security engineer, Mr. Ricardo. He will conduct a routine inspection of the mansion tomorrow morning. This will give us the opportunity to access the basement discreetly. I'm tracking Bianca's movements. She made a call to an unknown number shortly after you left this morning, but the call was quick and the number is prepaid, difficult to trace." Arthur felt a tightening in his chest. A prepaid number. More proof of Bianca's cunning. "Marcos, the priority is Sophia. Ricardo needs to be thorough in the basement. Look for any compartment, any indication that someone has been there or is there." He paused, taking a deep breath. "And keep Kako safe. He is the key to everything." As Arthur spoke, Bianca in the living room tried to calm her own nerves. The image of the doll, of that little daddy scribbled on it, burned in her mind. How could Sophia have so much hope? How could she be so strong? Rage bubbled in her chest, mixed with a subtle fear. What if Arthur really found out? She shook her head, dismissing the thought. No. He was under her control, the sedative, the grief, the manipulation. Everything was working. But Kako's gaze, fixed on her from the cage, seemed to penetrate her soul. "Stupid bird," she hissed, but her voice lacked its former conviction. In the shower, Arthur ended the call, feeling a mix of relief and dread. Ricardo's news was a ray of hope, but Bianca's call and her agitation reinforced the gravity of the situation. He stepped out of the bathroom, dressing quickly. He needed to maintain the charade, act like the grieving husband, while inside, the protective lion roared. As he descended the stairs, Bianca was sitting on the sofa, flipping through a magazine, but her eyes were vacant. She looked up as Arthur approached, a forced smile. "Better now, my love?" Arthur forced a smile back, sitting beside her. A little. Just the longing for Sophia that never fades. He reached out and touched her hand, a gesture that for him was now an act of pure dissimulation. His eyes, however, were fixed on Kako. The parrot, as if sensing the tension, let out a low squawk. "Sophia. Basement. Daddy." Bianca didn't seem to notice Kako's words, immersed in her own dark thoughts. Arthur felt a chill. The truth was so close, and he would do everything to bring it to light. The next morning would be decisive. He wouldn't sleep, planning every step, every word. Justice for Sophia was on its way, and he would be its instrument. His heart pounded, driven by his unconditional love for his daughter. He promised himself that very soon Sophia would be back in his arms, safe and loved. Dawn brought not peace, but an almost palpable tension that settled over the mansion. Arthur had barely slept, his mind a whirlwind of plans and apprehensions. Every sound in the house seemed amplified, every shadow an omen. He rose before the sun, dressing carefully, Sophia's image in his mind, a beacon guiding him through the darkness. He needed to be strong, unwavering, so as not to arouse Bianca's suspicion. As he descended the stairs, he found Bianca in the living room, flipping through a magazine with a cup of coffee, but her rigid posture and distant gaze betrayed her own unease. Their eyes met for an instant, and Arthur perceived a glint of distrust behind her mask of indifference. "Good morning, my love. Did you sleep well?" Bianca asked, her voice a little more strained than usual. "As much as possible," Arthur replied with a calculated sigh. "The longing for Sophia is a heavy burden." He sat down, picking up a newspaper, feigning interest in the news, but his ears were attentive to her every move. Kako, in his cage, watched the scene in silence, his intelligent eyes fixed alternately on Arthur and Bianca, like a silent judge. Shortly after, the doorbell rang, making Arthur's heart jump. It was Marcos with Ricardo, the security engineer. Arthur stood up, trying to remain calm. "It must be the engineer I hired for a routine security assessment of the house. With everything that's happened, I feel we need to reinforce the protections." He cast a significant glance at Bianca, who frowned, but didn't dare question openly. Her mind, still disturbed by the scene in the basement, seemed divided. Ricardo, a middle-aged man with glasses perched on his nose and a toolbox, was greeted by Arthur at the door. "Good morning, Mr. Arthur. Ricardo at your service. And madam, I presume you are Mrs. Bianca." He gave a polite bow, his voice professional and neutral. Bianca merely nodded, a tense smile on her lips. "Ricardo will conduct a full inspection, Bianca. We'll start with the service area and then the basement. We need to make sure everything is in order down there, especially with the humidity," Arthur explained, his voice firm, but his heart beating erratically. He knew Bianca hated anyone meddling in the basement. Bianca hesitated, her eyes flashing. "The basement? But there's no need. Arthur, it's just a storage for old things. There's nothing of value there." "Precisely," Arthur retorted calmly, "and that's why we need to ensure there are no leaks or structural problems that could affect the rest of the house. It's a precautionary measure." The logic was irrefutable, and Bianca, though visibly displeased, could argue no further. She clasped her hands, her anxiety evident. Ricardo began his work discreetly, checking cameras, doors, and windows. With each step, Arthur felt the tension rise. Finally, they reached the basement. The air down there was cold and damp, and the smell of mold was more intense than Arthur remembered. Ricardo shone a powerful flashlight, sweeping it across the stone walls and dusty boxes. Bianca remained at the entrance, arms crossed, her eyes fixed on Ricardo's every move, and on Arthur. "Mr. Arthur, the structure seems solid, but there are some damp spots that deserve attention," Ricardo began, his voice echoing. He moved methodically, tapping on the walls, checking joints. Arthur followed him closely, his gaze searching for what Kako had revealed. Suddenly, Ricardo stopped. He was near an old bookshelf, filled with forgotten objects. His fingers traced the wall behind the shelf, a spot that seemed slightly different. "Interesting," he murmured, tapping gently. The sound was hollow. Arthur felt a chill. Bianca, at the entrance, took a step forward, her breathing audible. Ricardo carefully pushed the bookshelf aside, revealing a section of the wall that looked false. There was a subtle, almost invisible line that indicated a hidden door. Arthur felt his blood run cold, a mixture of dread and overwhelming hope. It was there. The truth was there. "What is that?" Bianca hissed, her voice laden with thinly disguised panic. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the secret door. Kako, upstairs in the living room, let out a loud, clear squawk that seemed to pierce through the walls and ceiling. "Sophia! Basement! Daddy! Evil! Bianca evil!" Those words, coming from upstairs, struck Bianca like lightning. Her face paled and she staggered, her control slipping away. Arthur, on the other hand, felt a surge of adrenaline. Kako's voice was the final confirmation, the irrefutable proof. He looked at the hidden door, then at Bianca, his eyes filled with deep pain and contained fury. The mask had fallen. Justice was about to be served. Arthur felt the ground give way beneath his feet. Caco's words, echoing from upstairs, were a thunderclap that exposed the charade. His eyes, once filled with pain, now burned with icy fury, fixed on Bianca. She was pale, her lips trembling uncontrollably, her body recoiling as if she had received an electric shock. The panic in her eyes was so raw, it almost made her unrecognizable. Marcos, who had remained discreetly at the basement entrance, stepped forward, subtly positioning himself between Bianca and the secret door, a look of severe disapproval on his face. "Bianca, what have you done?" Arthur's voice was a hoarse whisper, laden with a pain so profound it seemed to tear at his soul. He didn't wait for an answer. His attention turned to Ricardo, who with a surgeon's precision was already examining the hidden door. The engineer used a small tool to force the crack, and with an agonizing creak, the wood gave way. A muffled smell of stagnant air and sadness escaped from the dark compartment. Arthur didn't hesitate. He pushed the door open forcefully, revealing a small, makeshift cell. Ricardo's faint flashlight beam swept the interior, and there, huddled in a corner, was Sophia. Her hair was matted, her face dirty, her eyes wide with fear, and, at the same time, a spark of hope that Arthur recognized immediately. She held the little rag doll, her small daddy scribbled on it still visible. "Sophia!" Arthur cried, his daughter's name escaping his lips like a long-held prayer. He lunged into the cubicle, ignoring the dirt and mold. The girl, hearing her father's voice, let out a sob, and with a strength Arthur hadn't expected, ran into his arms. He held her tight against his chest, feeling her small, fragile body, warm tears streaming down his face. Her scent, a mixture of dust and innocence, was the sweetest perfume he had ever smelled. "Daddy! Daddy!" Sophia sobbed, clinging to him with all her might, as if fearing he might disappear again. Arthur stroked her hair, kissing her head repeatedly, words caught in his throat. It was an embrace of reunion, of silent forgiveness for his blindness, of an unbreakable promise. Bianca, watching the scene from the basement entrance, collapsed. Her knees gave way, and she fell to the cold floor, her hands covering her face, her sobs now hysterical. The image of Arthur embracing Sophia, the living proof of her cruelty and her failure, was more than she could bear. Marcos watched her with a look of contempt, without a word, but his firm posture made it clear there was no escape. Ricardo, with a discreet gesture, turned on the basement lights, revealing the scene in its entirety: the small cell, the girl in her father's arms, the stepmother collapsed. Justice, indeed, was being served. Arthur lifted Sophia, holding her firmly, and stepped out of the cubicle. His eyes met Bianca's, and what she saw in them was not just anger, but deep disappointment, an overwhelming sadness at having been deceived for so long by someone he loved. "Your reign of lies and cruelty is over, Bianca," Arthur said, his voice now firm and cold, a stark contrast to the emotion of seconds before. Sophia, nestled on his shoulder, looked at Bianca with wide eyes, but without hatred, only a child's incomprehension. Arthur knew that the journey to heal Sophia's wounds would be long, but at that moment, having her in his arms was the only truth that mattered. The light of hope had returned to his life, and he would do everything to protect her with his whole being. Arthur held Sophia tightly against him, feeling the warmth of his daughter's body, a balm for his wounded soul. Her crying, once from fear, now mingled with sobs of relief, a sound Arthur would never forget. Marcos, with a firm but gentle gesture, helped Bianca to her feet. She was catatonic, her eyes vacant, her makeup smudged by tears. "You need to come with us, Bianca," Marcos said, his voice devoid of emotion. Bianca didn't resist, appearing like a puppet without strings, as she was led out of the basement by Marcos and another security guard who had arrived discreetly. The silence that followed her departure was heavy, but also liberating. Arthur, with Sophia still nestled in his arms, ascended the basement steps. The daylight, which once seemed cold and distant, was now an invitation to life. Kako, in the living room, stirred in his cage, emitting small squawks of triumph. "Sophia, Daddy, well, Sophia, well," he repeated, as if celebrating the victory of truth. Arthur smiled, a faint but genuine smile, at the parrot. "Yes, Kako. Sophia is well," he whispered, kissing his daughter's forehead. Ricardo, the engineer, approached with a soft blanket. "Mr. Arthur, the girl needs care. I've already called a medical team to come to the mansion discreetly. They are on their way." Arthur nodded, grateful for Marcos and his team's promptness. He wrapped Sophia in the blanket, shielding her from the cold and the world's gaze. The girl trembled slightly, but her eyes, once filled with terror, now sought her father's with touching trust. "Daddy, I was scared," she said, her voice small, almost inaudible. "I know, my love, but it's over. Daddy is here now, and I'll never let anything bad happen to you again," Arthur promised, feeling a lump in his throat. He carried her to the master bedroom, the same one where Sophia used to sleep before her disappearance. The bed, with clean, soft sheets, seemed a safe haven. While waiting for the medical team, Arthur sat on the edge of the bed, embracing Sophia. He stroked her hair, smelling the scent of childhood he had missed so much. Sophia, exhausted, fell asleep in his arms, a deep and well-deserved sleep, free from the nightmares of captivity. Arthur observed his daughter's angelic face, the small hands still clutching the rag doll. That little "Daddy" scribbled on it was a testament to Sophia's unwavering strength and hope, even in the darkest circumstances. He felt a pang of guilt for his blindness, for not having noticed the signs, for having allowed Bianca to hurt her. But this guilt would be transformed into an unwavering force to protect her and rebuild their lives. The medical team arrived, discreet and efficient. A gentle nurse examined Sophia as she slept, assessing her physical and mental state. "She's dehydrated and a little malnourished, Mr. Arthur, but the most important thing is the emotional trauma. We'll need time and a lot of love to heal these invisible wounds," the doctor said, with a soft and understanding voice. Arthur nodded, his eyes welling up. He knew the journey would be long, but he was ready for every step. Marcos returned to the living room, his expression serious. "Bianca has been taken, Mr. Arthur. She will answer for her actions. Justice will be served." Arthur merely nodded. Bianca's punishment, though necessary, was not his priority now. His only concern was Sophia. He knelt beside the bed, watching his daughter sleep. The morning sun streamed through the window, illuminating the room with a soft, promising light. It was a new beginning, a rebirth. The family, shattered by cruelty, began to rebuild brick by brick on the solid foundation of love and truth. The human connection so brutally severed was being restored, and Arthur promised himself that he would make every day a celebration of life and of his little Sophia's resilience. Overcoming adversity would be the motto of every dawn, and love, the purest cornerstone of their new home. Arthur remained kneeling beside the bed, watching Sophia. The morning sun bathed the room in a soft golden light, chasing away the shadows. The nurse, with kind eyes and a calm voice, finished her assessment. "She's sleeping deeply, Mr. Arthur. It's a sleep of exhaustion, but also of safety. Her body and mind are beginning to relax. We administered an IV for hydration. The most important thing now is rest and the feeling of being protected." She gently touched Arthur's shoulder. "The deepest wounds are the ones you don't see. Time, love, and patience will be the best remedies." Arthur nodded, observing Sophia's gentle breathing. The rag doll nestled in her hands was a tangible link to her resilience. He stroked his daughter's matted hair, a touch of promise for healing. Marcos entered the room, his face serious but with a glint of relief. "Mr. Arthur, the medical team is installing discreet monitoring. Bianca has been taken to the police station. Caco's testimony, the evidence from the basement, and Mr. Ricardo's witness account are irrefutable. Justice will take its course." Arthur merely nodded, his eyes fixed on Sophia. Bianca's absence was already a relief, a weight lifted from the air. Justice, for him, was secondary to his daughter's well-being. "Thank you, Marcos, for everything." His voice was hoarse with emotion. Marcos nodded and left, leaving them alone. Arthur sat in the armchair beside the bed, refusing to leave Sophia alone. He took her small, fragile hand and held it tenderly. Images of the past months, the pain of grief, Bianca's deception, Sophia's despair, played out like a film. Guilt squeezed him, a heavy burden for not having noticed. But this guilt mingled with a fierce determination. He would be Sophia's safe harbor, her shield against any harm. Downstairs in the living room, Caco squawked, "Daddy, Sophia, love, family." The parrot's words, once a torment, were now a hymn of hope, a constant reminder of the truth revealed. Arthur smiled, a tear rolling down his cheek. Caco, the most unlikely of messengers, had saved his family. The days that followed were entirely dedicated to Sophia. Arthur didn't leave her side, reading stories in a low voice, preparing her favorite meals. He helped her bathe, gently washing away the grime of captivity, each drop of water seeming to carry away a piece of the pain. He combed her hair, untangling the knots, an act of tenderness that rebuilt trust. Sophia, little by little, began to blossom. Her eyes, once frightened, now sought his with curiosity and love. She chuckled softly, nestling in his arms, finding comfort in safety. The mansion, once a stage for lies, now filled with a new melody. Childish laughter, Sophia's light footsteps, Arthur's calm voice. The trauma persisted, a subtle shadow in her eyes, but the light of paternal love was stronger. Arthur knew that recovery would be a long and delicate journey, but with each smile, each affectionate gesture from Sophia, he felt his heart heal. Their connection was restored, stronger and deeper. The family, though smaller, was more united and true. He promised to celebrate each day, the resilience and unconditional love that bound them. Overcoming adversity was not just a motto. It was the reality they built, one brick at a time, on the purest foundation of love. Arthur felt the weight of responsibility, but it was a weight he embraced with his whole being. That love, pure and unconditional, would be the driving force for every new dawn. He remained by Sophia's side, watching her sleep until the morning light transformed into a gentle dusk. When she finally opened her eyes, there was an instant of confusion, a flicker of fear, but upon seeing her father's face, a faint calm settled in. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice still weak. Arthur leaned in, kissing her forehead tenderly. "Yes, my love. Daddy is here and I'll never leave you again." He helped her drink some water, offering her small portions of a light soup the nurse had prepared. Each sip was a small step, each word from Sophia, a melody he thought he would never hear again. The days that followed were a delicate dance of healing and rediscovery. Arthur transformed Sophia's room into a sanctuary of love and safety. He read to her, told stories with funny voices, and together they drew on the bedroom floor, coloring fantasy worlds that chased away the shadows of the basement. Sophia, still fragile, began to show glimpses of her former joy. Her laughter, once rare and restrained, became more frequent, filling the mansion with a long-forgotten melody. Caco, the winged guardian, watched everything from the living room, his squawks now of encouragement. "Sophia, Daddy, play, happy," he repeated, like a chorus of hope. Arthur, hearing him, felt his heart warm with gratitude. The parrot, with its simple and persistent truth, had been the catalyst for all the change. The medical team continued to monitor Sophia, and the child psychologist, a woman with a welcoming gaze and a gentle voice, began sessions. She taught Arthur how to deal with Sophia's night fears, with moments of silence and difficult questions. "It's a process, Mr. Arthur. She needs to feel that she can trust, that the world is safe again," the psychologist explained patiently. And Arthur dedicated himself to this with unwavering devotion. He was always present, his hands firm and his gaze loving, building bridges of trust that Bianca had tried to destroy. He allowed himself to feel the guilt, but didn't let it consume him. Instead, he transformed it into fuel to be the best father Sophia could have, an unwavering pillar of love. The mansion, once a stage of dissimulation and pain, was reborn. The gardens, previously neglected, flourished under the care of Arthur and Sophia, who together planted new seeds, a vivid symbol of their own new beginning. Bianca, he learned from Marcos, was facing the consequences of her actions before justice, without any possibility of appeal. There was no anger in Arthur, only a deep sadness and the certainty that truth, however painful, would always find its way to light. Her absence was a space filled with light and unconditional love. One afternoon, Sophia, sitting on Arthur's lap, looked up at him with her large, bright brown eyes. "Daddy, I love you," she said, her voice clear and full of an emotion that made Arthur's heart overflow. He hugged her tightly, feeling every fiber of his being vibrate with that pure, restored love. "I love you too, my daughter, more than anything in this world." In that moment, all the pains, all the uncertainties, seemed to dissipate into the air. The human connection, the purest and most resilient, was fully restored. The family, though with a new configuration, was stronger than ever, forged in adversity and tempered by unconditional love. Overcoming adversity was the melody that cradled their days, and justice, the tranquility that allowed this melody to flow freely. Arthur knew they would face challenges, but with Sophia in his arms, he was ready to face any of them, certain that love would always prevail. Days turned into weeks, weaving a new tapestry in the lives of Arthur and Sophia. The mansion, once a stage of silence and sadness, now resonated with the melody of life. Sophia, with her father's patience and love, blossomed like a flower finding the sun. Her eyes, once shadowed, now sparkled with the joy of a child rediscovering her world. Arthur dedicated himself entirely to his daughter. He took her for walks in the gardens, observing butterflies and planting flowers, each seed a symbol of hope. Afternoons were filled with fairy tales, Arthur inventing voices, drawing laughter from Sophia. He taught her to ride a bicycle, holding her steady until she gained confidence. With every fall, he was there to pick her up and encourage her. It wasn't just about pedaling, but about trusting, overcoming, living without fear. The child psychologist continued her work, guiding Arthur and Sophia along a path of healing. The conversations, light yet profound, addressed fears and memories. Sophia, little by little, found her voice to express what she felt. Arthur, with an open heart, listened to every word, validating emotions and reinforcing the security of their new home. He learned to identify signs of distress and offer comfort, transforming guilt into protective strength. Kako, the parrot, remained essential to the family. His squawks, once desperate warnings, were now joyful greetings. "Sophia, Daddy, play, happy, family," he repeated as a spokesperson for happiness. Arthur and Sophia laughed at his antics. The parrot, with its wisdom, seemed to understand the fundamental role it had played, the witness to truth, the link that dispelled darkness and brought light. Bianca's absence was a reality, but not a wound. Justice had taken its course. Arthur knew she was facing the consequences of her actions without his intervention or resentment. The mansion, once a stage of dissimulation, was now a home of transparency and love. The doors were always open to friends and family who came to share the joy of seeing Sophia recovered. The house filled with laughter and conversations. A year passed since that day in the basement. Sophia, now taller and stronger, ran through the gardens with contagious energy. She still held her little rag doll, but the daddy scribbled on it was now a symbol of her journey, not her imprisonment. Arthur, watching her from afar, felt his chest overflow with gratitude. He had rescued his daughter, yes, but Sophia had also rescued him. She taught him about the resilience of the human spirit, the strength of unconditional love, and the ability to forgive oneself. Their lives were a testament. Even in the greatest adversities, truth finds its way, justice prevails, and love, the purest and most unwavering of feelings, has the power to heal all wounds. Arthur and Sophia, father and daughter, hand in hand, walked towards a bright future, building each new day on the foundations of trust, joy, and the certainty that together they were unbreakable. The family, in its truest essence, had been reborn, stronger and more united than ever, a beacon of hope and triumph. Months transformed into a new cycle of life for Arthur and Sophia. The mansion, once a stage of painful memories, was now a sanctuary of laughter and learning. Sophia, with the vitality of her 6 years, had become a curious and radiant girl. Her brown eyes, which once reflected the fear of captivity, now shone with the innocence and joy of a full childhood. Arthur watched her every step with a heart overflowing with love and gratitude. He took her to school every day, holding her small hand with a firmness that promised eternal protection. In the afternoons, they explored the world together. Whether in the mansion's gardens, discovering new flowers and insects, or on walks in the park, where Sophia ran freely, her laughter echoing like music. He taught her to read, to draw, to dream. Every book read, every drawing colored, was a brick in the reconstruction of a bright future. The child psychologist, Dr. Helena, continued to be a constant and welcoming presence. Her sessions were no longer about trauma, but about strengthening Sophia's self-esteem and celebrating her resilience. She helped Arthur understand that love was the most powerful therapy and that openness to expressing feelings was the key to complete healing. Arthur, in turn, found a new and profound reason for being in fatherhood. The guilt that haunted him had transformed into unwavering dedication, a daily commitment to his daughter's happiness. He allowed himself to feel the lightness of a heart at peace, a feeling he thought he had lost forever. Kako, the parrot, maintained his special role in the family. He not only repeated the phrases that saved him, but had incorporated new words, reflecting the atmosphere of joy. Sophia, Daddy, love, happy, family, forever, he squawked, flying through the living room, landing on Arthur's shoulder or Sophia's outstretched arm, which she caressed affectionately. Kako was more than a pet. He was a family member, the guardian of truth and the herald of happiness. The story of Arthur and Sophia, of the truth revealed by a parrot, spread not as a scandal, but as a testament to overcoming adversity. The mansion, once isolated by Arthur's grief and Bianca's dissimulation, opened its doors to the community. Arthur became involved in social projects, especially those aimed at vulnerable children, using his fortune and experience to make a difference. He knew that his own painful journey had taught him the importance of vigilance, empathy, and action. Bianca, he learned, was serving her sentence, and justice, at its own pace, had taken care of her actions. Arthur felt no hatred, only the certainty that everyone reaps what they sow. His energy was focused on the present and on Sophia's future. One sunny afternoon, as Arthur and Sophia planted new rose bushes in the garden, their hands dirty with soil, Sophia looked up at her father with a radiant smile. "Daddy, this rose will be the most beautiful of all, just like our love." Arthur hugged her, feeling the scent of the flowers and the warmth of that embrace. Life, with its complexities and challenges, had given them a second chance. The family, rebuilt with love and truth, was a flourishing garden, a living reminder that, even after the darkest of nights, the sun always shines again, stronger and more hopeful than ever. They were proof that human connection, resilience, and faith in good can overcome any adversity, weaving a tapestry of love that would last forever.